It's been 10 long years since Amnesia: The Dark Descent terrified players by having them explore the darkened corners of Brennenburg Castle as Daniel, a young man who doesn't know where he is or why he's being hunted by something unspeakably evil. Now, in 2020, developer Frictional Games is swapping those gloomy halls for the burning sands of the Saharan desert in Amnesia Rebirth. In development for 5 years and built using the same engine as Frictional's excellent underwater fright fest, Soma, Rebirth tells players from the outset not to try and win or beat it, but to completely immerse themselves in its story and atmosphere. Here's our review. It's really hard to talk about Rebirth's story without risking spoilers, so we'll keep descriptions brief. You play as Anastasie or Tazi Trianon, a French engineer and talented artist who's hired as part of a crew on a mining expedition flying from Algeria to French Sudan in 1937. While flying over the desert, the plane goes down as Tazi experiences visions of a strange alternate world beyond the window, and she awakens amidst the wreckage to find that all of the crew, including her husband Salim, is nowhere to be found. Tazi, who is also dealing with a traumatic event from her past, sets out into the sands to track down her friends with a vague sense that something is also tracking her. It's an ambitious plot that thankfully doesn't need you to have played the other Amnesia games to enjoy Rebirth. It works perfectly well as its own standalone title. That said, the lore of Rebirth is strongly tied to that of Dark Descent, so fans of that game may be able to piece together some of its plot points faster than others. But Rebirth is most interesting when it's doing its own thing and exploring some themes and ideas seldomly seen in horror games, or even games in general. Themes like family, and in particular motherhood, are given special attention, which can be a bit of a mixed bag given the game's almost all-male development and writing team.
I don't feel good.
Despite having the dubious honour of featuring possibly the most mentions of Croydon in a video game, Rebirth is also incredibly good at using its ensemble cast of voice actors to set the scene of a once-in-a-lifetime adventure gone horribly wrong. All of Tazi's crewmates are beautifully fleshed out as the story progresses and you learn more about them. Forbidden love, greed, selfless sacrifice, they're a diverse bunch, but none of them are quite so interesting as Tazi herself, who, true to an Amnesia game, remembers crucial details about herself as she wanders through the desert's labyrinthine network of caves to find her friends and her love. Mild spoiler alert, but Tazi's adventuring is not limited to this plane of existence for long at all, and she's played beautifully, fighting at every step to ground herself against impossible forces.
I'm sorry. I will be still.
Salim, I have you. I have you.
But although the story of Amnesia Rebirth tackles some interesting topics seldom touched on in games, the gameplay itself often seems a little stuck in the past. As a survival horror, your main concern is collecting up enough matches and oil so that you can venture far enough into the shadows to light a torch or a lamp and keep the darkness at bay so that Tazi isn't overcome by her fear. After lighting your way, you'll also need to contend with environmental puzzles in order to overcome obstacles. In one section, you're collecting up ingredients in order to manufacture a tank shell round to blast open a door, for example. And in another, you must operate an unusual machine, also to open a door. You have no means of defending yourself against the monsters that stalk you, so finding a way forward is your only hope. Which is all well and good, it's just there's nothing really new here. These are all variations of puzzles you will have completed before, and it's very obvious when the game moves from one section to another. You'll be sent out into dark corridors to find the parts you need to complete a puzzle, where hiding from monsters and keeping your fear in check will be necessary. This will then maybe tip into a chase sequence where you're being actively hunted and will need to run along the track the game has laid out for you, complete with environmental signposting, and from here you'll perhaps end up in a room where you'll be safe from the monsters as you complete a puzzle-solving section. Lather, rinse, and repeat. There's nothing wrong with this formula, of course, and it's in the tension these sections provide that the real game lies. But it does often feel like a game from 2010 rather than 2020. There's no evolution here. It's an issue made worse by the fact that there are a lot of bugs still present in Amnesia Rebirth when we played the game a week out from launch. Most of these were completely harmless, some corrupt pixels, some dropped sounds, an end credit sequence that slowly clipped into the top left corner of the screen. But one instance of a vanishing key item meant I had to restart the game from an earlier save. Fingers crossed all this should be fixed for launch, as the team have been working hard to correct any known issues. But it did make that crucial immersion in the game's atmosphere and story trickier than it needed to be. The best kind of horror, in our opinion, disguises real themes and issues in the garb of otherworldly monsters. Rebirth tackles some deeply personal topics, sometimes with tact and heart, sometimes pretty damn clumsily. And it's always at its most effective when it lets the smaller moments shudder with the terrifying familiarity of the everyday. As the story progresses, it strays further into the surreal, the fantastical, and the silly. And the writing loses some of its edge as a result. It feels like it tries to do a bit too much with every horror genre going, rather than doubling down and focusing on the great character work it did in the first half of the game. But there are certainly plenty of scares in Amnesia Rebirth, particularly in its earlier sections. As is true with many horror titles, the more accustomed you become to the thing or things that are skulking in the shadows, the less power they have to frighten you. In one moment later in the game, Rebirth literally fills an entire, fairly brightly lit room with monsters and has you take a walking tour around them. It's kind of hard to be properly scared of something once you've seen it napping from every angle going. And so, the later stages of Amnesia Rebirth do become more about puzzle solving and piecing together any remaining fragments of its story than about getting spooked. But those fragments do hold your attention right up to the end. We experienced 3 different endings to Rebirth, and it's possible that there are more. There were a few moments in the game that felt like potential branching paths. The endings we experienced felt somewhat underwhelming and a little rushed, but it's hard to deny that the journey was well worth the destination. Amnesia: The Dark Descent changed ideas about what a first-person horror game could be when it launched 10 years ago. Amnesia Rebirth follows closely in its predecessor's footsteps, but it does feel like the horror genre has changed a lot in those 10 years, while Amnesia has more or less stood still. Its fans probably won't care, and to be fair, lots of horror enthusiasts looking for a Halloween fix probably won't either. It just feels like there's a little bit of wasted potential here to have been more adventurous with its gameplay, given that its reinventions elsewhere work so well. The desert setting is surprisingly great, with an ability to fill you with cold dread even while burning under a scorching hot sun. And the characters are pretty brilliant at setting you off on your way, and also adding a touch of mystery and tragedy every now and again as Tazi remembers more of her friends, or their fates, or her situation as she goes. The broader story that we don't want to talk about here for fear of spoilers will be unpleasant for some players as it deals with some of the most difficult experiences a person might ever have to go through. But although Rebirth can be a little messy in how it expresses itself, it doesn't feel like it exploits these details for cheap emotional beats. Tazi makes for a great unreliable protagonist. She might not know where she's been or where she'll end up, but there's a humanity to her that grounds the rest of the game, even when things go a little off the wall. It's unlikely anyone really expected Frictional to reinvent the horror genre all over again with Amnesia Rebirth, but the team has crafted a competent and often thrilling adventure that, despite some technical shortcomings, does plenty of interesting things with its plot and setting. Journey off into the darkness and allow yourself to be swallowed up by the sands of the Sahara. Just trust us. don't forget to bring your matches. If you enjoyed this video, we will have a Let's Play of Amnesia Rebirth coming very soon, so subscribe if you haven't already and click the bell icon to be notified when new videos go live. There's a fresh one on this channel every single day. Until then, you can check out one of our other spooky videos. A selection should be on the screen now. Enjoy, and thanks for watching. Bye!